Hey there, I'm Dr. Sophie Hale, and you're watching The Vital Years. Scientifically proven, these vegetables can help shut down cancer-friendly pathways and supercharge your immune system. Think about your body like a garden. Every single day, seeds are landing in the soil. Some of those seeds are good. They're the seeds of repair, recovery, resilience. But some of them are not so good. Some are the seeds of inflammation, damage, mutation, disease. And the question is not just, how do I destroy the bad seeds? The bigger question is, how do I create a body where the bad seeds struggle to grow in the first place? Because that is really what health is. Health is not just the absence of disease. Health is your body actively defending you. It is your body repairing DNA damage before it becomes dangerous. It is your immune system spotting abnormal cells before they turn into something worse. It is your circulation feeding healthy tissue. It is your microbiome helping regulate inflammation. It is your internal chemistry constantly trying to keep you alive, stable, and strong. And when you understand that, food stops being just calories. Food becomes information. Food becomes instruction. Food becomes a daily signal you send into your biology. I'm Dr. Sophie Hale, and today I want to show you why certain vegetables are so much more powerful than most people realize. Not because they're trendy, not because somebody online called them a superfood, but because real science shows that compounds inside these foods can influence cancer-related pathways, inflammation, detoxification systems, and immune defenses in ways that are honestly remarkable. Now let's be clear from the beginning. Vegetables are not chemotherapy. They are not a replacement for medical treatment. If someone already has cancer, they need real medical care. But that does not mean food is irrelevant. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming that if food is not a drug, it must be weak. That is not true. Food is one of the most consistent biological exposures in your life. You do it every day, multiple times a day, year after year, and those exposures add up. So when we talk about vegetables killing cancer cells, what we really mean scientifically is that certain plant compounds have been shown in laboratory and preclinical research to slow cancer cell growth, trigger programmed cell death, interfere with angiogenesis, reduce oxidative stress, modulate inflammation, and help create a metabolic environment that is less favorable for cancer progression. That matters, because cancer does not appear out of nowhere in one dramatic moment. It develops in an environment. It grows in conditions. It takes advantage of weakness. It feeds on inflammation, damaged signaling, dysfunctional immunity, and sometimes a blood supply that helps it expand. So if you want to think about vegetables the right way, don't think of them as magic bullets. Think of them as terrain shifters. Think of them as changing the soil. And one of the most powerful categories of vegetables for doing that is cruciferous vegetables. I'm talking about broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, bok choy, kale, arugula, watercress. These vegetables contain sulfur-rich compounds called glucosinolates. And when you chop them, chew them, or digest them, those compounds can break down into bioactive molecules like sulforaphane and indole-3-carbinol. Now this is where things get really interesting. Sulforaphane has been studied for its ability to influence detoxification enzymes, reduce oxidative damage, and interfere with cancer-related signaling pathways. In preclinical research, it has been associated with effects like slowing proliferation, encouraging apoptosis, and making the internal environment less friendly to malignant behavior. In plain English, that means this. Compounds in broccoli and its cousins may help stressed, damaged cells behave less recklessly, while also supporting the body's own defense systems. And the beauty of it is that cruciferous vegetables don't just work in one narrow lane, they are multitaskers. They don't only speak to one cell type, they interact with detoxification pathways, inflammatory pathways, antioxidant defenses, and even the way your body handles environmental stress. That's huge. Because disease rarely comes from one single problem. It usually comes from multiple systems drifting in the wrong direction at the same time. Now if you really want to level this up, pay attention to broccoli sprouts. These tiny young sprouts are loaded with precursor compounds that can generate even more sulforaphane than mature broccoli. That doesn't mean you need to live on sprouts. It just means sometimes the smallest foods carry an outsized biological punch. And here's the key point. When you eat these vegetables regularly, you are not trying to create one dramatic event, you are creating repeated protective signals. That is how prevention works, not once, repeatedly. The next category is allium vegetables, garlic, onions, leeks, shallots, scallions. These vegetables are loaded with organosulfur compounds, and those compounds have been studied for effects across different stages of carcinogenesis. That includes influencing detoxification, reducing inflammatory signaling, affecting microbial balance, and in some models, slowing the growth of abnormal cells, or pushing them closer to self-destruction. Garlic is especially fascinating because when you crush it or chop it, you activate compounds that were sitting there quietly until you broke the plant tissue open. In other words, preparation matters. You're not just eating a flavor, you're activating chemistry. And that chemistry may matter far beyond taste. Researchers have explored how compounds in garlic and onions may interfere with the initiation and promotion of cancer, particularly in the digestive tract. Again, we have to be honest, human nutrition research is messy. People don't eat garlic in a vacuum, they eat it inside patterns, cuisines, habits, lifestyles. So the evidence is not as simple as saying, garlic equals no cancer, but the mechanistic science is strong enough that these vegetables deserve real respect. And there's another angle here people forget. The immune system and the microbiome are constantly talking to each other. What affects the gut can affect inflammation. What affects inflammation can affect immune surveillance. What affects immune surveillance can affect how well the body handles emerging abnormal cells. So when you add more onions, leeks, and garlic to meals, you're doing more than seasoning your food. You may be feeding a larger defense strategy. Now let's talk about tomatoes. Technically a fruit, yes, but culinarily, for most people, this is a vegetable conversation, so tomatoes belong here. Tomatoes are rich in lycopene, one of the best-known carotenoids studied in relation to cancer biology, especially prostate cancer. Lycopene has been associated in research with antioxidant activity, anti-inflammatory effects, and possible roles in slowing cell division, reducing angiogenesis, and influencing cell signaling. And here's what makes tomatoes so practical. They're easy to use, fresh tomatoes matter. But cooked tomato products can be especially useful because cooking can help make lycopene more bioavailable, especially when eaten with a little healthy fat. So this is one of those rare moments in nutrition where tomato sauce is not just comfort food, it can also be biochemically strategic. Now, does that mean every spoonful of tomato sauce is some kind of anti-cancer medicine? No, let's not get ridiculous. But it does mean that regular exposure to tomato-based foods as part of a vegetable-rich diet may be doing much more inside your body than your taste buds realize. And this leads to something important. A lot of people are waiting for one miracle food, one perfect ingredient. One thing they can point to and say, that's the one, that's what protects me. But biology usually does not work like that. It works in combinations. A meal with broccoli, onions, garlic, tomatoes, and leafy greens is not just a meal, it is a network of compounds arriving together. Fiber, polyphenols, carotenoids, sulfur compounds, minerals, vitamins, thousands of plant molecules interacting with thousands of human pathways. That is not weak, that is sophisticated. Now let's move to leafy greens, because this is where people often underestimate the basics. Spinach, kale, chard, mustard greens, collards, romaine, mixed greens. These vegetables may not sound as dramatic as broccoli sprouts or garlic chemistry, but they matter for a reason that is easy to overlook. They help support the broader biological environment that determines whether inflammation rises or falls, whether the gut microbiome stays diverse, whether blood sugar stays steadier, and whether your tissues are being nourished instead of constantly stressed. Remember, cancer does not grow best in a well-regulated environment, it grows best in chaos. And leafy greens are anti-chaos foods. They provide fiber that feeds beneficial gut microbes. They provide folate and carotenoids. They help crowd out the hyper-processed foods that drive excess energy intake and metabolic dysfunction. And when you improve the ecosystem of the gut, you influence one of the most important interfaces in the human body. The place where food, microbes, immunity, and inflammation all meet. That's not a side issue, that's central, because your gut is not just a tube food passes through. It is an active command center. It helps train the immune system. It helps shape inflammatory tone. It helps influence how well you tolerate stressors. So when somebody says, leafy greens aren't exciting, I think they're missing the point. Sometimes the least glamorous foods are the ones quietly holding the whole system together. And then there's a category people don't think of enough: deeply colored vegetables. Red cabbage, purple carrots, beets, dark greens. These colors are signals. They often reflect phytochemicals that can participate in antioxidant defense, help buffer oxidative stress, and contribute to a more resilient internal environment. People hear phrases like oxidative stress, inflammation, immune activation, detoxification, apoptosis, angiogenesis, and they start to feel like they need a biochemistry degree just to eat dinner. You don't. Here's the simple version. Cancer-friendly biology tends to like constant damage, chaotic signaling, poor immune surveillance, chronic inflammation, and a nutrient environment that favors growth without control. Protective biology tends to like repair, regulation, balance, cellular cleanup, microbial diversity, and a strong but not reckless immune response. Vegetables tend to push you toward the second state. That is the big picture, not perfection, direction. And if you want to make this practical, let me show you what this looks like in real life. Breakfast could be eggs with sautéed spinach, onions, and tomatoes. Lunch could be a chopped salad with arugula, cabbage, shredded carrots, broccoli sprouts, olive oil, and lemon. Dinner could be salmon or beans with roasted Brussels sprouts, garlic, and a side of tomato-rich vegetables. That is not an extreme diet, that is just strategic eating.
And before someone says, but what if I don't like vegetables? Let me say this gently. Your taste is trainable. Most people think preference is fixed. It isn't. Taste adapts.
The more often you eat bitter, fibrous, sulfur-rich vegetables, the less shocking they become, and the more normal they start to feel. Your palate learns, your microbiome shifts, your cravings change, your biology begins to expect better input. This is one reason health transformation can feel slow at the beginning and surprisingly natural later. You are not just changing meals. You are changing your internal conversation. Now, another important point, variety matters. Don't make the mistake of taking one study on broccoli and deciding the answer is to eat enormous amounts of broccoli forever. Biology likes diversity. Different vegetables bring different compounds. Different fibers feed different microbes. Different pigments reflect different protective molecules. The goal is not obsession. The goal is range. Rotate cruciferous vegetables. Use alliums often. Bring in tomatoes regularly. Load up on leafy greens. Eat the rainbow, but especially the vegetable side of the rainbow. And if you are wondering whether cooking destroys everything, not necessarily. Some compounds are better preserved raw. Others become more available with heat. Some benefit from chopping and resting. Some pair better with fat. This is why a mix of raw and cooked vegetables is such a smart approach. Salads matter. Soups matter. Roasted vegetables matter. Stir-fries matter. Sauces matter. You do not need perfect preparation. You need consistent exposure. That's what matters most. I also want to say something to anyone listening who has already been through a health scare. Do not hear this message as blame. If you've dealt with cancer, or someone you love has, this is not about saying you should have eaten more broccoli. That is not how medicine works, and it is not how compassion works. Disease is complex. Genetics matter. Environment matters. Chance matters. Life is not a neat moral equation, but complexity is not helplessness. That's the point. Even when we cannot control everything, we can still influence something, and sometimes the most powerful changes are the ones we repeat quietly, without drama, over long periods of time. That is where vegetables belong, not in fear, not in perfectionism, not in food guilt, but in strategy, in support, in daily partnership with the body you live in. I'm Dr. Sophie Hale, and if I could leave you with one idea, it would be this. Stop asking whether a vegetable is magic, and start asking what message it sends into your biology. Does it feed inflammation, or calm it? Does it nourish the microbiome, or starve it? Does it support immune surveillance, or burden it? Does it help build a body that resists disease better, or a body that is easier for disease to exploit? Because once you start thinking that way, your plate changes. And when your plate changes consistently, your biology starts changing too. So yes, scientifically speaking, some vegetables really can help kill cancer cells in the lab. Interfere with cancer-friendly pathways, and strengthen the systems that help defend you. Cruciferous vegetables do it with compounds like sulforaphane. Garlic and onions do it with organosulfur chemistry. Tomatoes do it with lycopene. Leafy greens and other non-starchy vegetables help do it by supporting the ecosystem that keeps immunity, metabolism, and inflammation from drifting off course. No single vegetable will save you, but the right vegetables, eaten regularly, can absolutely help make your body a much harder place for disease to thrive. That is not hype, that is biology. And the best part is, you do not have to wait for a prescription to start. You can start with your next grocery list. You can start with your next meal. You can start by adding, not panicking, a bag of broccoli, a red onion, a few tomatoes, a bunch of greens, a tray of sprouts, small choices, repeated often, powerful over time. That is how health is built, and that is how food becomes part of your defense. If you want, I can do 2 useful follow-ups next, a tighter YouTube-ready version, with stronger hooks and retention beats, or a clean 3,000-word polished final draft, with even more emotional storytelling, and smoother transitions. Evidence base behind the science in this script. The strongest specific mechanism section comes from research on cruciferous vegetables, where NCI notes that glucosinolates break down into compounds such as sulforaphane and indole-3-carbinol that are studied for anti-cancer effects, even though human outcome data remain mixed. National Cancer Institute. The broader prevention framing comes from the World Cancer Research Fund, which supports diets rich in whole plant foods and concludes that higher intake of plant foods, especially fiber-rich foods and non-starchy vegetables, is associated with lower risk for several cancers overall, while also emphasizing the importance of dietary patterns rather than miracle foods. World Cancer Research Fund. The garlic and onion material is based on mechanistic and epidemiologic evidence showing that allium vegetables contain sulfur compounds with plausible anti-cancer actions across several stages of carcinogenesis, while human diet studies remain difficult to interpret cleanly. PMC. The tomato section is grounded in reviews of lycopene research showing anti-cancer activity across many preclinical and some human in vivo studies, particularly around prostate cancer biology, while still acknowledging that intervention evidence in humans is more mixed than headlines often suggest. PMC